Our speaker will share his Hero experience, strength and hope, for approximately 45 minutes. So we ask, out of respect for our speaker, to please remain seated until he is finished. It is my pleasure to introduce Jerry.
My name's Jerry. I'm an alcoholic. Forever grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous in this way of life. And it's an honor and a privilege to be up here. You know, when Mike asked me this morning, I didn't even hesitate. You know, I never say no in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, service work and commitments is a big part of my program. And no matter how long I've been sober, you know, it's taking the action and staying out of the results. And it's good to be here. I know a few people, and we're all members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is the beginning of a journey beyond description, you know. And like I say, my sobriety date is October 13th, 1972, you know. And one day at a time, and being active in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a way of life, you know, and it's all through the program, the fellowship. You know, you cannot do this by yourself, believe me. You know, I tried and it don't work. And the thing is, you know, what I'm up here sharing is, you know, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And what happened prior to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was just out there running and gunning. You know, my main concern was to get loaded and stay loaded, and drinking and drugs was a way of life. Never gave it a second thought that I had a problem. Even though I was not convicted, but I had 7 felonies back in the 60s and 6 misdemeanors, all drug and alcohol related. And, you know, it was just crazy out there. But, you know, it was a way of life. Not one time that I can ever recall that I might have a drinking problem or a drug problem. Not one time. You know, I was in total denial of this disease. And that's how cunning, baffling, and powerful this disease is. And if you're sitting here tonight, nobody makes it to the rooms by mistake. Believe me, you know, we're here for a reason and we're here for a purpose. And the thing is about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a way of life that's pretty good. And there's ups and downs, but we get through it and get on the other side of it and we keep going. But back in the day, like I say, you know, first time that I can recall drinking was we used to skip school, me and my best friend, and would wait until his mother would leave for work, and we'd go in this corner store, liquor store, whatever it was, and steal a bottle or 2 bottles of wine, go across the street where he lived, and go up. I remember go upstairs to his apartment, and we'd drink wine and sniff glue, you know. I mean, really, you know, that's just the way it was, you know. And I used to, yeah, sniff glue and drink wine and just act crazy, you know. It was insanity. And this is at the age of 14. And as time went on, you know, when I turned 17, I actually graduated from high school. I went to, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 different high schools. But I wound up back in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area, where my parents sent me, and graduated back there. And upon graduating, I joined the military. You know, I was 18 years old, and going into the military, I was stationed back east, Fort Jackson, I believe. And when you're 18, you could only drink 3.2 beer, you know, and you could drink a ton of it and just maybe get a little buzz, maybe, you know. So what I did, I went to the office and I told them I lost my Army ID. And they made me up a new one, and I lied about my age. You know, I told them I was 21, and they wrote down that I was, 21. And then it really began. You know, I could actually buy or drink alcohol, whatever percentage. It was a much higher than 3.2. And it went on for a while, and then I was in there for about a year. Then I got sentenced over to Korea in 1959, I believe. And the best part about Korea and what I remember about it was beer was 10 cents a bottle. It was American beer. Shot of whiskey was 20 cents. And we used to walk maybe, 100, maybe 200 yards to the NCO club. And there'd be 5 or 6 of us sitting around the table, and it was just, the whole table was full of booze. You could drink as much as you wanted. And then we had to walk back to the barracks, which was about 100 yards, maybe 2, but, and get up the next day and do whatever. And that went on for like 13 months. And then coming back to the States, I was sentenced back east again. And continued drinking, and I did lose a stripe over in Korea. I'd like to tell you what I did, but I don't remember, but I did lose a stripe. And but anyway, went back still in the military and drinking and doing whatever, and I actually got discharged in 1962, and I told myself, I'm going to party for the next 2 years. That's what I told myself. And I did. I was just out there running and gunning. It was just, insane. And I remember one time we had this apartment, me and a friend of mine, and I walked into the apartment, and there was, I'm going to say 4 or 6 pistols pointed at my head. It was the detectives. They found weed in there, and back then it was the 60s. But I remember the guns being pointed at my head. And they took me to jail. And believe it or not, this gal I was dating, she actually bailed me out of jail, And that was a good thing. And then I got arrested again. And she bailed me out again. And I said, wow, I'm going to hang on to this gal, And I asked her to marry me, and we got married. Oh, yeah, man, I wasn't about to cut her loose. And anyway, it continued, We were married for about 8 years, 3 kids, and it was insanity, L.A. County Jail, I was not new to the L.A. County Jail. Been there, done that, And finally I came home one day, and she packed up with the 3 kids and left, And I walked into the house, and everything was taken out of that house except a transistor radio. And it belonged to my daughter. And, anything expensive was gone, And the thing is that I was listening to it one day. And what they were doing, they were actually advertising. It was the Pasadena Alcoholism Council was advertising about drinking and alcoholism. And the first question they asked, has your wife left you? I said, oh, shit, Yeah, okay, And about 3 days later, I actually wrote down their number. And when I called them, they said, what's going on? I said, well, I said, I might have a drinking problem. Well, call this number. and it was Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And I actually called them, and they told me where the club was at in Covina, California. It was called the 502 Club. And the thing is, you know, I actually went over there, and I went over there about 10 o'clock in the morning, and the doors were closed. And my first thought was, shit, I ain't sticking around here. But this is what 12-step and phone numbers are so important, is that those two guys that 12-step me the day before, 2 days before, they actually gave me their phone number, and I had it on me. And what I did, when I turned around to leave, back in the day they had these phone booths. It cost 20 cents to call. And I actually had 20 cents on me, and I walked across the street and I called them. And within 30 minutes they were there babysitting me until the club opened. And I remember they took me inside, they took me into the meeting. It was my first contact with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was a type of person, I wouldn't tell you the time of day. Because back in the day, I was being investigated by 2 detectives for some felonies I committed. And they were questioning me and going on and on and on. I'm just sitting there. And finally I said one word, and that word was maybe. And they stood up, handcuffed me, and took me to took me to my cell, you know. And from that day forth, believe me, I wouldn't tell you the time of day. And but anyway, when the doors opened, you know, we're in the meeting, and I didn't share, but I identified with the results of my drinking. And that's what I identified with. It wasn't my emotions or my feelings, because those were all pushed down. And the thing is, at the end of the meeting, I actually raised my hand, said, my name's Jerry, I'm an alcoholic. And from that day forth, my life changed, because the seed was planted. And what I'm saying about the people sitting in this room, if you're in this room, believe me, you know, you're alcoholic. Believe me, you know, the seed has been planted. And the thing is, I didn't get sober right away. I did stay sober for, I think probably at least 4 days. You know, and Friday came along. This was on a Tuesday. And when Friday came, that was drinking day, you know. And that went on, like I said, off and on. I had, out of those 2.5 years, I had 5 months and 20 days back in Ohio, Cleveland. I wound up back in Ohio for whatever reason. And I actually had 5 months and 20 days. Then I came back to California. And the thing is, my last drink of alcohol, and this is a pretty good story, was I took a bus from Cleveland to St. Louis. And I always like to save money, you know, for whatever. So I started hitchhiking in St. Louis on the other side of the Missouri River, I believe. And I got all the way to Flagstaff. And I remember standing there, hitchhiking, and this guy pulls up. He says, come on, all right, you know, sounds good to me, you know. And bottom line is, he says, you mind if I stop and buy a 6-pack? I said, that really sounds good to me, you know. And he gets back in the car and he hands me a beer. And I was thirsty. I downed it. And he looks at me. I says, can I have another one? He looks at me. He says, already? I says, yeah. I says, I was thirsty. So he hands me another beer, pulls off to the road, and get the hell out, you know. So anyway, I drank that, and that was my last drink of alcohol. You know, I remember hitchhiking to Kingman, and I've always had a place to stay or whatever. But anyway, that night I remember sleeping in some bushes next to a bar or whatever. Anyway, it was the next day I got up and hitchhiked on to California to a place called the Crossroads, and I was in and out of that place I don't know how many times. But the bottom line is, rule number one, you drink your asses out, But I knew about the place, and I actually, first I went over to my wife's house, ex-wife, or I don't know if we were still married or not, but I went over there, and I knocked on the door like I wanted a place to stay, and she looks at me and slams the door in my face, And that was a hint to get the hell out of there. So I went over to the Crossroads. Oh, wait, before I went over there, I called this guy. I can't think of his name. But anyway, I called him. I says, I need a place to stay. He says, you're welcome, Jerry. So I hitchhiked on over there and stayed there. And that was when my sobriety began. One day at a time, working the program and going through sobriety by not drinking was the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love this saying. It's on the walls. When anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to always be there. And when I stuck my hand out to AA, the hand of AA was there, and they pulled me back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. They knew about me. They knew my story and everything. And rule number one, I remember we were talking. They said, Jerry, get a sponsor. Okay. And it was, like I said, it was hard for me to even ask you the time of day. I remember going across the street to the phone, and I picked up the phone, and his name is George, he passed away about 8 years ago, but anyway, I'm beating around the bush. I didn't want to ask him, He says, Jerry, he says, what do you want? I says, will you be my sponsor? He says, yeah, start calling me every day, I said, why do I have to call you every day? He said, because when you're thinking about drinking or you're going to go out and drink, it's a lot easier to pick up that phone and call someone, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and how true that is, and going through the steps, that was something else, I remember going through first and second and third, and when it came to the fourth step, I'm not much of a writer. Believe me, I don't like to write at all, and the fourth and fifth is about writing. And every time I'd see my sponsor on the Friday night meeting in Covina, he says, how you doing on your steps, Jerry? Oh, I'm doing fine. I'd lie to him, And that would make me feel guilty. Then I'd go home and write more and more, and maybe 2 months later, I finally finished it up. And I remember going over to his house with, 4 or 5 sheets of paper, fifth step, and he says, come on in. I remember going into the bedroom, and we're sitting down, and I still didn't want to share it with him, My thought was in AA, you have to share it with another human being. And my thought was, well, shit, I'm going to go to L.A., and talk to somebody on Skid Row, get a bum off the street and tell him my fourth and fifth step. But anyway, I'm sitting there. I didn't say anything. Then he started to share with me his story. And I'm going like, wow, you did that? Whoa, And he was telling me his fifth step. And what that did is open me up, where I shared mine. And I remember leaving his house. And first we went out back on the patio, and he ripped my fifth step up, and I remember he burned it, And by taking the fourth and fifth step, that made a foundation of rock in Alcoholics Anonymous, It just made it a lot stronger member of AA. And finishing the steps and working the program and working with other alcoholics, doing what we do here, sober and clean, is a miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. By all rights, we should be out there getting shit-faced. On a Saturday, and here we sit clean and sober. And to me, that's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And go back maybe a month ago. I went back to Arkansas to visit my youngest son. You know, he lives up in where Walmart is at. And believe it or not, my ex-wife lives back there too. And we actually got together. I remember we went out to dinner. We went to the zoo. She took me to the zoo, and she took me to a couple other places. What I'm trying to say is that we're friends today. And believe me, prior to AA, it was nothing like that, believe me, you know. And it's through the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, and my brother lives back there. And me and my brother, we really didn't get along. Because I remember one time I was in the county jail, and I asked him if he would bail me out of jail, $50 to get me out. I had, I don't know, it was like a $300 to get out. Anyway, I did 25 days, and I asked him, I said, can I have $50, you know, get out 5 days early? He hung up, click, you know. And that ain't the only time he hung up. You know, oh, wait, my wife hung up one time. I got arrested, and I called her up. I said, Virginia, will you come and bail me out? Click, you know. There's a lot of clicks, you know, and like I said, I was just out there running and gunning. It was insanity. But the thing is, you know, I went back there and I visited with my son, and that was awesome, you know, and going to some Civil War battlefields and stuff like that. And, you know, I actually spent a whole week there. And, you know, family is so important in Alcoholics Anonymous, believe me. You know, because if you continue to drink and use, you're going to lose them. That's a given. You know, and today I have a relationship with all three of my kids, you know, adult kids. And my oldest son, Frank, I remember he was out there running and gunning and doing a lot of drinking and drug use, and I bailed him out of jail a couple of times. And I remember I was dating this gal in Al-Anon, and he got arrested again. He calls me up, and she says, you know what, you're doing more harm bailing him out of jail than just let him sit in there and realize what he's done. So when I went over there, when he got out, you know, I told him, oh wait, I bailed him out, but I told him, I said, don't you ever ask me to bail you out of jail again. And he's been sober and clean over 20 years, about 25 years now, you know. And it is, you know, when you do more good to somebody trying to help them while they're drinking and using drugs, the more harm you're doing, you know, really. And the thing is, you know, it's just something else. And the good things that have happened to me is beyond description. You know, like I said, you know, going out to dinner with my ex-wife, believe me, you know, it was never like that before. And love, caring, and compassion is what I found here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't judge. We don't point the finger. We don't say, well, I'm better than. We're all equal in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Believe me, you know, it's not how many times you've been arrested or what you drank or used or whatever. You know, if you're sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, the love and compassion and understanding is here because we've been where you've been, you know, really, in reality, you know. And the thing is, either emotionally or mentally, we've been where you've been. You know, it might be in a different degree or whatever, you know. But like I say, what I love about Alcoholics Anonymous, we're all here together. And believe me, together we can make it. You know, it's a program of action. And being sober one day at a time and living sober is truly a miracle, you know. Like I said, when Mike called me this morning, I didn't hesitate, you know. I do a lot of service work. And I live in Chino Valley, and I'm not the treasurer of Chino Valley, but they give me money every meeting I go to, you know, to put in the bank, you know, and it's just something else. And the thing is, you know, when I go into the bank, all three tellers know me by my first name because I'm there probably every Monday, and we talk or whatever. And, the society that we live in nowadays, AA is a society that pretty damn good. It really is. And coming in tonight, people out there handshaking, didn't know anybody, but they're out there handshaking, and the thing is, Alcoholics Anonymous, like I said, what I found here is love and caring and understanding of another human being. And there's a way of life here that's pretty good. Like I said, I started drinking in east of L.A. back in the 50s, 55, well, something like that. But anyway, yeah. And I was talking to a friend of mine. We went on a hike this morning over at, anyway, it was a nice trail, hour and a half. And we were talking, and communicating, with another human being. It's just something else. Because my vocabulary back in the day, it was like this. It was like 4 words. Hey, man, what's happening? That was my vocabulary. Really, that was my vocabulary. And the thing is, being in a Los Angeles County jail, I remember one time I was walking down the aisle after a visit, and here comes somebody towards me with 2 guards on each side of him, and we're walking, and finally I make eye contact with him, and it was Charlie Manson. And this is what I did. Hey, man, and he goes, hey, like we knew each other, really, and that's insanity, believe me, totally. Like, hey, man, what's happening? This way of life, I always say this, and I say it in a lot of meetings, never had it so good, here in Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship, and working the program and working with newcomers, carrying the message, somebody, about the big book, if you don't have a big book, get one, and read the 165 pages, because I remember at my second AA meeting, I was sitting there and I shared, I was my second AA meeting, and after the meeting, the old-timers got me off in a corner, and they actually bought me a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I still have it today. It's falling apart. It's the second edition of Alcoholics Anonymous. And but I remember them buying it for me and saying, Jerry, I know what they were saying about the reading was, I know the 165 pages, but I had a resentment against my brother. And I mean, I was pissed. It was up number 10, resentment. And they said, read this page. I think it's 416 or something like that. It's about resentments. And when I read it, it didn't take the resentment away, but it took a lot of things off my shoulder about him, And I remember going to him one day. I was sober for a while. Me and my son was driving to work, and he says, how come you don't talk to Jack? I said, I didn't want to get into details. And the thing is, about 3 days later, I went over where he was living, and we're standing out front. And instead of me pointing the finger at him, I told him where I was at fault, And I shared that with him. I said, and we talked for about a half hour, 45 minutes or something like that. And I remember when we were leaving, when I was leaving, I remember we hugged each other, And it was like 18 years. And the thing is, when I walked away, I could feel this anger and resentment coming off my shoulders, and that's working the program, It's always easy to point the finger at somebody else, but what you do, you look inside. and when you can look inside, you see the truth, you know. And if you can talk about it, you can live with it, you know, believe me. You know, I was a type of person, like I said, I wouldn't tell you the time of day. And coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, I have feelings and emotions that I can feel today, and they're real. You know, they're not consumed by whatever or whatever. You know, they're real feelings, and I deal with them on a daily basis. And being sober for a period of time, you know, I've been through a lot. You know, getting married. No, well, we didn't get married, but we were together for 22 years, me and this gal. And I was 2 years sober, she was 1 year sober, and I always say this, AA boy meets AA girl on AA campus, you know. And we were together like 22 years. And the day that she died, I remember like it was yesterday, you know, my first thought was, I'm going to go get drunk, you know. That's what my feelings told me. But AA taught me to pick up that phone. And I remember going home, picked up that phone, and I called a good friend of mine. His name was John. I says, John, get my ass to an AA meeting. Half hour later, we're sitting in an AA meeting, and I haven't left Alcoholics Anonymous from that day forth. You know, AA has been a way of life that's given me a way of life. And today, you know, my friend, he still lives in California, and we touch base once in a while, you know, and I'm forever grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous and this way of life and going through life sober and living sober and the ups and downs. You know, bottom line is we don't drink, you know. If it was just a plateau or whatever of living, you know, what the heck. But it's like this, you know. I remember when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, my highs and lows was like this. And I went to my sponsor and telling him about whatever was going on. He says, Jerry, the longer you're sober, the highs and lows will go like that. And how true that is, you know. Whatever happens, we don't drink. You know, we go to meetings. We reach out our hand to another alcoholic. We work with other alcoholics. You know, coming here tonight is truly a gift. I don't take nothing granted for Alcoholics Anonymous because it's a way of life that's given me a way of life. You know, living sober, it's just a miracle. It really is, you know. And for that, I'm just forever grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship of AA. Thank you.
Let's thank our speaker one more time.